The old man's expression suddenly twisted, his face contorted with fury. He argued it was Leu Shang who crushed the hope of their lord. And for that, Leu Shang must pay with his life. By the third day, Dong Po Chan was on a roll, taking down yet another beast. By now, he'd gotten used to the intense environment and the pressure around him. Even the fearsome level 8 beasts couldn't withstand a single strike from him. Meanwhile, back in the conference room, the marshals were utterly shocked. It had only been 3 days, yet Dong Po Chan's merit points had already reached a jaw-dropping 1.58 million. They couldn't even begin to imagine how many beasts he'd killed so far. While the other 3 representatives combined didn't even come close to his score, one top general remarked that Dong Po Chan's strength was probably on par with his own now. Not to mention the other 3 were still battling at the 1,000-meter mark. While he was already 3,000 meters deep, some even began comparing the representative, saying the difference between Dong Po Tian and the rest was like a kitchen knife versus a great sword. And this wasn't even the craziest part. Dong Po Tian was still under 50 years old, making him shockingly young for someone of his caliber. That being said, everyone in the room couldn't help but notice something odd, because nobody seemed to know where Leu Shang was. All they could see was that his merit points hadn't changed at all. Whispers started spreading across the room. Was Leu Shang avoiding the competition on purpose? Curious eyes turned toward the Eastern Marshal, but he stayed calm. All he really cared about was to figure out what Leu Shang was up to. The scene shifted back to Dong Po Tian. By now, taking down level 8 beasts was as easy as breathing for him. After finishing them off, he would carefully gather their bodies. Over the past 3 days, he'd lost count of how many beasts he'd killed, but he was sure his merit points were in the millions. However, he couldn't dive deeper into the ocean. Anything beyond 3,000 meters would cause the communication devices and cameras to malfunction. And this was pretty much his limit as well. So he decided it was time to head back. As he slowly swam upward, he could already picture the future, solidify his position as the #1 general star in the entire military. Ready to step into the ranks of the top generals. I wonder how he'd feel if he knew our boy is already a top general. Just as he was basking in this thought, a strange noise came from below. Instinctively, he turned around and looked below him. What he sensed made his heart skip a beat. He could almost feel the powerful blood energy coming from it. Could it be human? No way, he thought. That was impossible, or at least it should be impossible. Whatever it was, this overwhelming presence sent chills down his spine. This kind of power felt like nothing less than a 9th-level martial saint. But who or what could possibly surpass him by so many levels in sheer blood energy alone? But again, who would even stay in the pitch-black depths of this endless ocean? He took a deep breath, convinced there had to be some terrifying beast lurking down there. Deciding not to stick around to find out, he turned back and headed for the surface. When he surfaced, the other 3 also began to appear one by one. The girl chuckled, noticing that their hauls of trophies were pretty similar to hers. She thought to herself that this grand military competition wasn't anything special after all. But then they saw Dong Po Chan's loot. Their jaws practically hit the ocean floor. In the conference room, the merit points had already been tallied. Dong Po Chan racked up a staggering 7.5 million points, while the other 3 only had 300,000, 160,000, and 200,000 respectively. When the girl heard this, she could hardly believe it. The combined scores of all 3 of them didn't even come close to being a fraction of Dong Po Chan's total. The trio had no choice but to accept the massive gap between them and him. It seemed their only role in this competition was to highlight just how ridiculously strong Dong Po Chan was. And yet, Leu Shang's merit points still sat stubbornly at 0. Had he left? But that couldn't be right since no one had seen him leave. A few marshals were starting to look disappointed, some even questioning whether Leu Shang was as powerful as everyone claimed. Maybe he hadn't managed to defeat a single beast. But the Eastern marshal stayed calm, knowing full well what Leu Shang was capable of. He wasn't worried about embarrassment. He just wanted to know where Leu Shang had gone. The scene shifted to the deepest part of the ocean. It was a place so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Leu Shang stood there, silently clenching his fist, then slammed it into the rocky wall beside him. Over the last 3 days, his body had been pushed to the limits, much like it had been during his gravity chamber training. The pressure of the deep sea, combined with his water breathing, had made his attacks even more powerful. Around him lay the massive corpses of countless beasts. But Leu Shang wasn't focused on them. He had something more important to test, which is experimenting with moving his immortal cells to other parts of his body. Starting with his arm, he extended one hand forward and clenched it tightly. It was so powerful he could grip anything into the void. A faint smile appeared as he nodded in satisfaction. Then came his leg. With a single stomp, the seabed collapsed. The force rippled upward, breaking through layers of the ocean. At first, the change on the surface was subtle. Just small disturbances in the water. No one noticed except Dong Po Tian. The next moment, towering water pillars erupted from the ocean, forming a massive vortex near the warship. Dong Po Tian's eyes widened as he realized this was the same energy he felt from the deep sea just moments ago. The water pillars spiraled wildly. Within the vortex, Leu Shang appeared, and with just one stomp, he effortlessly got back to the surface. Dong Po Tian gulped hard, staring at Leu Shang in disbelief. Could it be him? Meanwhile, Leu Shang looked pleased with himself, testing his ability to merge the immortal cells with his stellar body technique, channeling the energy throughout his entire body. With just one casual punch, he estimated that he could now unleash a strike equivalent to 100 stars. With one stomp, he could shatter the depths of the ocean. As the beast corpses began floating up to the surface, Leu Shang paused to reflect. Before surfacing, he had taken a quick detour into the dream realm to check on the future. As expected, the future shifted once again. This time it seemed that he managed to slip away with nothing more than minor injuries. Yet even so, this clearly wasn't the future he had hoped for.